Well, hello and welcome to this debate of the candidates for Ottawa Centre for the 2022 Ontario election. Sorry, we're a little bit late this evening. This debate has been put together by a volunteer debate organizing team with the Hampton, Iona and McKellar Park Community Associations, which are active here in the western end of Ottawa Centre. Now, this program will last about 2 hours, and we are lucky to have 7 of the 10 candidates registered to run in Ottawa Centre with us tonight. There will be 2 sections in this online program. In the second section, we have dedicated an opportunity for the 4 independent and minor party candidates to offer each a statement about their own platforms. And I'd like to introduce them. If you can wave, I'd like to introduce them. Independent candidate Josh Rachlis and new blue candidate Glen Armstrong and Ontario People's Front candidate Raymond Samuels. And again, that portion of the show will begin at about 8:45. So we'll return to the 3 of them so that they can have a chance to say their statements for their platforms. Now, until then, we have created a debate format for the 4 major party candidates this evening. New Democratic candidate Joel Harden is the incumbent in this race. Shelby Bertrand represents the Green Party of Ontario in this riding. Katie Gibbs represents the Liberal Party of Ontario, and Scott Healey represents the Progressive Conservative Party. Now, the questions you're going to hear asked in this debate came from both members of the community associations in Ottawa Centre, as well as from people like you through email. Now, Ken Hoffman is also watching on Twitter for hashtag OttCenterQ, and that's OTTCTRQ. For people who want to pose a question, if you get it in during the live feed or by email, the email address is ottctrq@gmail.com. So we hope we can include a couple of your questions from social media and email tonight. So let's begin. Each of the major parties will be asked to deliver an opening statement. They have drawn numbers out of a hat. Can I hear what the lineup is? Who is first, second, third, fourth?
Katie Gibbs first, Scott Healey, Shelby Bertrand, and Joel Harden.
Okay, so we start with Katie Gibbs. Go ahead.
Thank you so much. Well, hi, everyone. I'm so excited to be joining you all tonight for another great conversation about the issues in our community. I am joining from the unceded and unsurrendered Algonquin and Anishinaabe territory, and I'm running to build a more sustainable and equitable community. I'm a scientist by training. I have a PhD in conservation biology from the University of Ottawa, and I graduated during the height of the Harper War on Science days, which some people might recall. So I ended up leaving academia and starting a not-for-profit organization called Evidence for Democracy to push governments to be more evidence-based and transparent. And then in February 2020, just before the pandemic started, I went on maternity leave with my second child. So I've been at home with 2 young kids for most of the past 2 years. So I know firsthand how hard of a time this has been for so many in our community. And it was so clear to me during this time that our current government does not care about listening to science. They do not prioritize the needs of families and kids and those most vulnerable in our community. So I decided I needed to do something and work to build the kind of Ontario that I want my kids to grow up in. So the Ontario Liberals have a really fantastic, bold, creative plan full of concrete solutions that we can implement on day 1 to make life better for Ontarians. We're going to build 1.5 million new homes. We're going to make transit $1 across the province. We're going to phase out for-profit long-term care, and we're going to help kids recover from 3 disrupted school years. These are big solutions that will directly impact the lives of students, seniors, and everyday residents here in Ottawa Centre. Thank you so much.
That's great. That's Katie Gibbs with the Liberal Party. Next is Scott Healey, who is carrying the PC banner in this riding. Go ahead.
Thank you very much, Amanda, and welcome everybody to this important community dialogue for the provincial election. I'd like to thank all the organizing community groups that are working towards putting this together, and of course recognize my colleagues, the other candidates who all make a big sacrifice to participate in this process. We know how much it can take away from family time, and that is always so important. I think most of you have already checked out our bios. As Amanda said, I'm Scott Healey. I'm the Progressive Conservative candidate for Ottawa Centre, seeking to be your MPP at Queen's Park on June the 2nd. This is my first campaign, and I have been in the Canadian Armed Forces for decades now. I won't mention how many decades, that would give away my age, but I want to take the skill sets that I've learned through a multiple of situations and experiences of leadership, team and consensus building, and decision making to the political arena. And a lot of people have asked me, Scott, why don't you just retire? Why don't you just take it easy and do something far less challenging for yourself? Well, I want to continue to serve. I have served, as I said, for 40 years, and I want to continue that. And I wanted to continue it in a different process, and that was by being an elected official. And the opportunity came up to be the candidate here in Ottawa Centre for the Progressive Conservatives. And I took that nomination, knowing how much of a challenge it can be for a Progressive Conservative in this riding. I want to say that I fully support the policies as we move forward. And I've always been a Progressive Conservative of the policies of what Doug Ford and the Progressive Conservatives are putting forward in this campaign. That is rebuilding the economy, infrastructure, working for workers, ensuring that we stay open, and ensuring that we put money back in the pockets of ordinary Ontarians. So thank you very much. I look forward to the dialogue today, and thank you.
That is Scott Healey with the BC candidate here in Ottawa Centre. Shelby Bertrand is next. She is representing the Green Party of Ontario.
Thank you so much for that. Good evening, everybody. My name is Shelby Bertrand, and I'm your Green Party of Ontario candidate for Ottawa Centre. We're here tonight on this unceded Algonquin territory to talk about the future of this beautiful community and the future of Ontario. I'm an educator with U Ottawa, an activist, a Crohn's patient, and previous worker with residential school survivors here in my third election to do some myth busting. Far from simply the environmental party, the Greens are here to build better communities for Ontarians. With Mike Schreiner at Queen's Park, the Green movement will uproot inequality, lower the cost of living, and give hardworking Ontarians the healthcare and education they deserve. Ottawa Centre has spoken to me. Ottawa Centre has told me on hundreds of front porches and in hundreds of phone calls about worry for the state of our healthcare system, about worry for affordable housing, about worry for the cost of living, the environment, about our community's marginalized groups. I'm running for the Green Party of Ontario because I want to run for the party with the smartest solutions. Smart solutions recognize that what's better for people is usually better for the world. I came here tonight to show you that our best and brightest future lies in the best and brightest communities. And these are the communities the Green Party wants for Ottawa Centre. And these are the communities I, with Mike Schreiner, would fight every day for at Queen's Park. Thank you.
And again, that's Shelby Bertrand. She's running under the Green Party banner. And Joel Harden comes up the rear. He is the representative here, the incumbent, and representing the NDP. Go ahead.
Thank you, Amanda. And thanks, folks who organized tonight. I also want to begin by acknowledging that we're all guests here on Algonquin territory, Algonquin Anishinaabe territories. And I want to thank all the elders from Algonquin Anishinaabe lands here who shared their wisdom with me. This is an opportunity for us to really think about who we send to Toronto on behalf of our community. And I want to thank every single person who's had the opportunity to demonstrate your leadership in this community and take time to share that expertise with me. It has truly been the honor of my life to serve as your member of provincial parliament. And my goodness, here in Ottawa Centre, we've been through a lot. We've been through historic floods twice. We've been through a tornado hitting our power station and knocking the power out, the Westboro bus crash, the pandemic, the convoy, and whatever that was with motorcycles a couple of weekends. We have been through a lot. And one of the things I know is this community is rich with compassion and rich with expertise. So my focus has been to listen to you, to hold over 64 public events, town halls, community meetings, to try to figure out what you want your MPP and the MPP office to champion at Queen's Park. And I'm proud to say we won some gains for our community. After 2 years of pushing, I was able to convince the Conservative government to call a public inquiry into the light rail transit system that we desperately need to work to do our part for the climate. I was able to go to bat for seniors, persons with disabilities who've been dislocated from their loved ones when conditions of care disputes were presiding. I went to bat for personal support workers who were told they could have free tuition, free books, and paid work placements, and something else by Willis College. I've listened, I've tried to work as hard as I can, and I want to do that. I want to continue to do that. What I learned from the convoy moment, to be honest, friends, is that we have to encourage dialogue and understanding in this country. And that is something I take to heart as a student of Jack Layton and Olivia Chow when I started in the 90s, and right now as someone who wants to be your MPP again. We can do so much together, so much to share with Ontario, and I can't wait for the conversation tonight.
Thank you. Thank you, all of you, for your opening statements. The questions tonight have been organized around themes from planning and development to housing, healthcare, seniors, and more. Our first set of questions come from the community associations and are mostly focused on development issues. Each of the 4 candidates will be given a chance to respond to these 3 questions. You get 60 seconds each to answer. At my discretion, a candidate who is targeted by comments from another candidate could be offered a chance at a rebuttal. You get 60 seconds to respond. So here's the first question. It comes from the Island Park Community Association and Champlain Park Community Association. Here's the question. In this ward, the official plan, secondary plans, and zoning bylaws are routinely set aside and regulations drafted case by case. Concerns about quality of life, road safety, the environment, and a lack of public service to support growth are either dismissed as outside the scope of the planning process or ignored. The Ontario Land Tribunal appeal process is time-consuming and too expensive for community organizations to pursue. And the Local Planning Appeal Support Centre, which provided free and independent professional planning advice, was closed in February 2019. So here's the question. What specific steps will your party take to restore public confidence in the integrity and meaningfulness of the planning process? We're going to start with Scott Healey, then Shelby, then Joel, and then Katie. So let's start with Scott Healey with the PC Party.
There we go, on mute, I guess. The Progressive Conservative Party will be supporting whatever the regulations and directives that are currently in place to support community associations. My door as an MPP would always be open to work with community groups to ensure that the bylaws and that the regulations and the directives that have been imposed by the province on municipalities, when these are actually municipal issues on development within the city, to be supported by the local communities. And as a MPP for Ottawa Centre, I would work towards ensuring that those guidelines were followed and that the community groups were respected and their voice was heard.
Thank you very much for that. Shelby Bertrand is next with the Green Party.
Thank you so much for that. This issue has come up a couple of times in public discussion so far, and I want to reiterate that transparency and that dialogue between communities is crucially important for the Green Party, which has very communal values in general on its platform. I think that timely notice for communities about these kinds of things is extremely important, and that is an area in which the ball has been dropped several times before. Targeting that appeal fee is something that's explicitly on the Green Party platform and that I'm particularly passionate about. And I'm going to steal from Scott that phrase, "the door will always be open." I absolutely love that, and that's my attitude that I would take as an MPP too. I would be your community member. I would not be some lofty official that is closed off and not open to dialogue with you. And a lot of these issues, I have to say, pertain to affordable housing, and a lot of community members that are taken advantage of are protected under the Green Party's 60-page affordable housing platform.
Thank you very much, Shelby. And Joel Harden is next with the NDP.
Thank you, Amanda, for the question. I'm really resonating with what's being raised here because too many community associations are put into an adversarial situation at a disadvantage. I'm thinking about the Mechanicsville Community Association, that's currently dealing with the row over the embassies and the displacement of our urban tree canopy. I'm thinking about the Hintonburg Community Association that's currently having to contest a 12-story plan. And when community organizations spend their volunteer time to work with city officials to develop a community development plan, and a developer walks along and says, I'm going to seek a variance on this, and it's simply green lighted by a majority at city council that is influential with the development interests in the city, that's simply not fair. So what I would like to do as the NDP, what we want to do for community associations is bring back the legal help that used to exist. So community organizations didn't have to fundraise for their advocacy. They could sit on an even footing with developers, their consultants, their lawyers. Local voices need to be consulted. Their opinions should matter, and we will ensure they matter.
Thank you, Joel Harden. And Katie Gibbs is last with the Liberal Party.
Yeah, thank you so much for the question. You know, me personally and the Ontario Liberals know how important it is to have that local input into land use planning and processes. We're at a challenging point right now where we know that we need to intensify our communities to get the housing that we need and build up, not out, as part of our climate goals. But right now, the trust and confidence from communities in that process is so low. So we have to work to rebuild that trust so that we have a plan that people have confidence in, and they know that the plan will actually be implemented and not sort of changed on the fly on a project by project basis. One of the things that's specifically in our budget is 15 million annually to put into the Ontario Land Tribunal process to help clear that backlog so that we can get through these processes faster. Thank you.
Thank you, Katie. We are going now to question number 2 in this section. This question comes from the Civic Hospital Neighborhood Association. And again, you'll each get 60 seconds to respond. And we will hear from Shelby Bertrand first, Joel Harden, Katie Gibbs, and Scott Healey. And here's the question. In this riding, residents of adjacent 2- and 3-story homes are opposed rezoning applications for high-rise residential developments our city councillor has characterized as, quote, greedy. These include towers at Roosevelt, Wilmot, and Winston Avenues, originally proposed for 16 and 14 stories, and at Carling and Parkdale, proposed for 28 and 22 stories. How would your party generate more housing, yet respect the character of existing neighborhoods and ensure residents have input into development decisions? Again, we're going to start with Shelby.
Thank you for this. It really touches on a lot of things that are important to the Green Party. I think a lot of what I spoke about in my last answer is applicable here. And I'll also note that the preservation of green space and giving everybody a kind of public backyard and preserving things like the tree canopy is extremely important for mental and physical health. And that's something that's very important to the Green Party. And also something that's very important to the Green Party is combating the kind of development that is just purely residential, which again is bad for mental and physical health. I'm thinking of urban sprawl, but you could say that high rises invite the same problem. And we would want mixed purpose neighborhoods where people live near where they work and where they shop and where they play, and everything is around a 15-minute drive or commute from each other. And so those are the kinds of communities that the Green Party envisions, and we would have smarter urban planning that would avoid disrupting a classic community like this.
Thank you, Shelby. We go to Joel Harden next.
Thank you, Amanda. So to repeat what I said earlier and fully agree with my Green colleague, I know that community associations right now, particularly the Civic Hospital Community Association, are very frustrated with the fact that they participate in good faith with many different developers and development interests. We could also add the Ottawa Hospital to this list around the very disputed parkade that's going to be dropped on Queen Juliana Park. And when those consultations happen, they find out revelations later that the hospital is moving in a completely different direction, or a developer is moving in a completely different direction. I find that deeply disrespectful because people give up their free time as volunteers to engage with planning processes, and we have to respect that time. That's why, again, we will ensure as an NDP government, folks have access to legal help and legal resources to sit at an even keel. And when developers promise one thing and do another, you will see an NDP government act to ensure the community's consultation is respected. That's something that's important to us.
Now we hear from Katie Gibbs from the Liberal Party.
Yes, well, thank you for the question. I mean, I will agree with a lot with my 2 previous colleagues. I think there's so little trust right now from community in the process. They feel like developers have all the say and they participate in these processes and their voices are not heard. So I think we know that we do need to intensify, and intensification doesn't have to be a bad thing. I mean, in my view, it's how we build thriving neighborhoods and have the population to support wonderful businesses and activities. But I think people need to know that there are guidelines around intensification, that all of those new homes are going to have access to parks and green space, that they're going to have access to the community centers that they need, that all of those services are going to keep up with the intensity, and that the intensity isn't just going to be driven by developers. So you're not just going to get 1-bedroom condos across the board, but you're also going to get places for families, for example. Thank you.
Thank you, Katie. Katie Gibbs with the Liberal Party, and last, Scott Healey.
Thanks, Amanda. Everyone on this call lives in a unique community. When I moved from Halifax in 2009, I moved into a unique community. And I agree with all my colleagues that communities need to be protected. Community groups need to be listened to. They need to be properly respected by City Hall in the development that is going on around them. Intensification is going to occur. That is clearly outlined in the city long-term plans, and we're seeing it all around it. But it must be respectful of all citizens. Having a 10-story building plunked up beside your house obviously is going to be very distressing for people. We need to be able to support them. And this, myself as your MPP would do that. Again, back to a cliche, the door will be open, and I'm sure it'll be open with everyone on this panel, to support local communities, to ensure that they get the support from their provincial government in order to deal with City Hall, since most of these issues are with City Hall, not with the provincial government. As I said earlier, obviously they will provide guidance to City Hall on development.
Okay, that's the rule for the rest of this debate, that if you run out of time, the mic is cut, unfortunately, but you'll get the hang of it. Still under the section of questions that come from our community associations. Again, you have a minute to respond. This question comes from the McKellar Park Community Association. A big concern in Ottawa and other cities as cities intensify is the loss of tree cover and not enough green space and parkland. How would you ensure potential parkland, green space, and farmland is not lost to new housing development? Is this best seen as a provincial responsibility or a municipal responsibility? And if municipalities are not setting aside enough land for green space, would you intervene? This time we're going to start with Joel Harden with the NDP.
Well, I'm thankful to the folks in McKellar Park for the question, because it gives me an opportunity to say that I've been proud to listen, because I heard it first from community advocates about the planned parkade at Queen Juliana Park. It has been an atrocious error, I believe, of folks at the Ottawa Hospital to propose removal of at least 523 mature trees from the experimental farm, perhaps more, other estimates exist. And also we have the Mechanicsville Community Association currently in a legal battle with the NCC and proposed embassies to protect the Roche Park's tree canopy. We have to make sure we keep our tree canopy, and it distressed me to learn from my friend Angela Keller-Herzog of the Green Party that when she contacted cities forestry here in the city of Ottawa, they weren't even keeping track of the amount of trees that we were losing. They're essential for our mental health. They're essential for drainage. They're essential for us to be able to get out and walk around and enjoy our wild spaces. You can count on me to listen to you and to protect our urban tree canopy. It matters to me.
We are going to hear next from Katie Gibbs, then Scott Healey, then Shelby Bertrand. Let's go to Katie Gibbs with the Liberal Party.
Yes, thank you so much for the question. So one of the things that's in my local platform is actually to push to get an urban tree strategy at the provincial level. This is a concern that I heard again and again from people at the doors in Ottawa Centre, that we are losing our trees and not planting new ones. And as we know that as the climate changes, we're going to have more and more heat waves. And so having a rich urban tree canopy is going to be so essential for keeping our communities cool and actually saving lives. And part of the challenge is that right now, urban trees don't really have a home anywhere in government. They don't have a home in the provincial government. So one of the things that I want to do is actually push for urban trees to have a home in the provincial government, and have dedicated funding for municipalities to track the urban tree coverage, plant new trees, and actually nurture them and make sure that they do grow into mature trees. Thank you.
Thank you, Katie Gibbs. And now we go to Scott Healey with the PC Party.
Thanks, Amanda. When I was in Halifax in September 2003 and Hurricane Juan hit, I saw the devastation that hurricane did to Point Pleasant Park and the public gardens. And it was devastating. Trees were knocked over by the tens of thousands. So I have, like Joel and everyone else on this line, I appreciate and understand the value of trees. And I certainly have enjoyed them like everybody, and feel that more effort must be put into both urban planning and the preservation of trees. When development occurs and expansion occurs, that has to be a priority in city planning. And again, certainly having an MPP that's going to work with you to ensure that funding could be secured for those organizations. One organization within the city that actually does some good work on trees is Centertown Community Center. They have a program where they go out and count trees, the health of those trees, to ensuring that their community is being well represented. But certainly you get no argument with me for preservation of trees.
And Shelby, I believe you're last. Go ahead.
Thank you so much for that. So I think it's no surprise that trees are a huge part of the Green Party platform. I don't think I'm shocking anyone in announcing that. And touching on part of the question about the involvement of the municipal government, part of why I'm attracted to provincial parliament is that ability to pivot between federal and municipal. And there would definitely be open lines of connection if I were your MPP with municipal government. A lot of what I said in my previous answer about transparency definitely applies here. And I'd like to emphasize the nature of these smart solutions for urban planning on the part of the Green Party, where our solutions to society's problems are strategic. And for instance, we recognize with a popular certain example right now of the parking garage for the hospital that we need to be building other types of health institutions to start with instead of continued Band-Aid solutions. So we would try everything short of getting rid of trees and only do that if it's absolutely necessary.
Thank you, Shelby. The next group of questions are about housing. So it's one of the key themes in this campaign, and we received many, many questions from you about housing. The first question is directed at all candidates, and the first question of this and the next three themes will be directed at all four candidates. So once again, each of you gets 60 seconds for this question. We start with Katie Gibbs, and then we go to Joel Harden, Shelby Bertrand, and Scott Healey for this question. And this comes from resident Spencer Dunn. He asks, as the housing market becomes increasingly more sporadic and expensive, people are finding themselves priced out of most neighborhoods and are unable to even procure affordable rentals. People working full-time are having a tough time, not to say anything about those who are on Ontario Works or ODSP. What are the candidates going to do to ensure there's affordable housing for the most vulnerable in our society and for the young adults looking to start their lives? And again, we start with Katie Gibbs with the Liberal Party.
All right, thank you, Spencer, for a great question. We have a fantastic housing plan. I will try to fit it into a minute. First of all, I'll say that housing is a fundamental right, and you are absolutely correct. Every single person in our community deserves to have a stable place to call home. We have an ambitious plan to build 1.5 million new homes over the next 10 years. We're going to create a new entity, the Ontario Home Building Corporation, to actually finance and build these homes. Some will be for sale in the market, but many will be non-market, deeply affordable units through nonprofit housing and cooperative housing. We're going to tax homes that are sitting empty. We're going to ban new non-resident ownership, and we're going to put a use it or lose it tax on developers who leave land empty. And we're going to try to put incentives in place to help convert underutilized commercial space into housing, which could be a great way to bring more homes into Centertown in particular.
Thank you for that, Katie. And we go now to Joel Harden.
Thanks, Amanda. And thank you, Spencer, for the question. I'm going to try to zero in on Spencer's insistence that we think about those most marginalized low-income folks on Ontario Disability Support Program, or perhaps Ontario Works, those working in minimum wage jobs, and how we think about housing and how to address housing affordability for them. We are the only party in this election, to my knowledge, and my colleagues can correct me if I'm wrong, that are proposing tenant-to-tenant rent control. One of the major drivers of increased rents in our city is that when one tenant moves out and someone else comes in, there's a gap in our rent control legislation. The landlord, particularly large multi-property landlords, are choosing to jack up the rent at the new tenant's expense. Under an NDP government, there will be a public registry so you can find out what the last tenant paid, and rent control will apply from one tenant to another. So we don't see these $300, $400, $500, $600, $700 rent increases for folks who are already struggling to get by. Real rent control is a core promise for the NDP, and we will make it happen.
Okay, next is Shelby Bertrand. Shelby, go ahead.
Thank you for that. I'm actually going to start with a correction of my friend Joel. The Green Party also will instill vacancy rent control to stop rent going up in between tenants. I also want to mention that it's very clear to me that the predatory corporations that snap up currently affordable housing predate upon the aged privately owned buildings that a lot of maybe newcomers to Canada and folks on ODSP currently reside in. We would be doubling Ontario Works, ODSP, and all related benefits packages from the Green Party. We would also, in more concentrated legal forms, protect people particularly vulnerable to that process. We would have not-for-profit housing providers be given a preemptive right to buy. We'd support currently underused demolition control bylaws. We'd establish and enforce robust penalties for renovictions, and we'd make landlords demonstrate whether renovations are necessary.
Shelby Bertrand with the Green Party, and next is Scott Healey with the PCs.
Thanks, Amanda, and thanks, Spencer, for the question. And I would concur with Katie. Housing is a fundamental right, and it's incumbent upon government to ensure through initiatives, both private and public, that housing is provided to people. And for me, Bill, we're looking at about a 1.5 million home commitment by the Progressive Conservatives over the next 10 years. I think the big difference there will be that the record of the Progressive Conservatives of getting things built is certainly better than some of my colleagues. And since the rent control was lifted on new builds since 2018, rentals, the building of new rentals has actually gone up by about 14%, including buildings here in Ottawa. Also, the government is moving forward on getting through municipal, gridlock with regards to regulations and just slowing the process down.
Okay, thank you very much. So this is our fifth question. This following questions in each theme are directed at specific candidates, often at the discretion of the people who sent in the question. So this question is directed at NDP candidate Joel Harden and PC candidate Scott Healey, and we're adding Liberal candidate Katie Gibbs to this question. This question is an amalgam of two questions about rent control. One from a landlord, Maria Cinquino, who worries about efforts by MPPs during the previous session, including Joel Harden, to introduce a Rent Stabilization Act. Now, that act did not pass in the legislature, but Maria worries about that under that plan, rents would not keep up with inflation costs borne by the landlords. And then there's Catherine LeBlanc. Now, she asks the question from a different perspective. She worries about the need for rent control to make sure that people can continue to afford living in the community. So here's the question. What will you do to address calls for rent control in Ottawa Centre? And why do we start with NDP candidate Joel Harden?
Well, thanks, Amanda. What I would say to both questioners is that I supported and proposed the Rent Stabilization Act with 3 other colleagues in the official opposition, precisely because rents are becoming vastly, vastly unaffordable. And this kind of system, tenant-to-tenant rent control that I described earlier, exists in other provinces. It exists in Quebec. It exists in British Columbia, where tenants actually have some guarantees and security. Now, I can identify with the need for landlords to be able to have a margin to keep their properties up to date. That's what the rent control standards that we have allow for. However, we also have to make sure that rents become affordable. Right now, it is happening all over the riding, and I'm going to cite the case of one Westboro resident who we've worked with publicly, Melissa Niji, was incentivized to move out of her unit as she saw 2 other people in her triplex be incentivized by a landlord to move out of her unit. She is living on a fixed income, runs a culinary business, and could not afford what was out there on the existing rental market. And so what happened eventually is that the landlord was visiting her on a constant basis, trying to encourage her to move out. We don't think that's fair. People who are tenants have rights under the Residential Tenancies Act. Those rights need to be respected. And we understand landlords want to make a margin, and they have a right to apply for rent increases if there's substantial renovations done to the unit. But rent control exists for a reason. Families want to live in the downtown, and 52% of people who live in Ottawa Centre are renters. And we want to make sure they can continue to live downtown. That's why the NDP supports real rent control.
Thank you, Joel Harden. Again, you get I don't think I mentioned this, but you do get 90 seconds for these answers. Scott Healey, you're up next.
Thanks, Amanda. That goes back to answer, the earlier question. For me and the Progressive Conservatives, it's a supply and demand issue. The more supply you have, the more, prices will be moderated and will go down. And with regards to the actual question from the resident, no, I wouldn't support the rent stabilization. That would not be a policy that I would. I believe it would be punishing small landlords, okay, that have one property or two properties when they're using those properties for income. So no, I would not support that.
Okay, and finally, Katie Gibbs.
Yeah, thank you so much for the question. So it was under a previous Liberal government that we did bring in rent control in Ontario. And then one of the things the Ford Conservatives did was eliminate rent control for any new builds during that time, creating sort of a two-tier rental market system. And I think we've clearly seen the effects of that with housing affordability going through the roof and us actually having a housing crisis right now. So we would bring back rent control to all units across the province as we had before. I will say we also, another part of this is supply. If you look at the population growth and the new home builds, the supply is just not keeping up with demand. So our plan to build more new units is going to help, especially since so many of them are earmarked to be non-market, deeply affordable units through nonprofit and co-op housing. That's going to provide a lot of relief for people. Additionally, we actually have in our plan that we're going to create a legal framework for a rent to own option for people as well, so that renters can actually have their rent go towards the eventual ownership of their home. And we see that as a really sort of unique and innovative pathway for more people to get in on owning their own home. Thank you.
Okay, we have another question in this category. The following question in this theme is directed at, hang on a second, let me just make sure I have that right.
Amanda, I'm sorry to interrupt, but can I just ask a process question quickly?
Yeah, sure.
Is there any capacity as we go through the various questions for rebuttals to take place, or do we just go through question by question? And I'm sorry to belabor, just wanting to know.
Joel, did you feel that you needed a rebuttal for this question?
No, not about
No,
anything
okay.
folks said about my position,
Yes.
but is that
If
that's when it happens? Okay.
Absolutely. If I hear that someone needs to make a rebuttal, then I will direct one. And of course, you can flag me if you feel strongly about it as well. Let me just go now to question number 5. This question is directed at Liberal candidate Katie Gibbs and PC candidate Scott Healey. And here's the question. You have 90 seconds to answer this question. Cannabis stores have very clear parameters where they can operate in the community. However, beer stores can open in front of public parks, creating problems for parents, children, and other vulnerable populations. What kind of changes would you make to the current way that cannabis stores are popping up across the city? And why don't we start with Katie Gibbs?
Yeah, thank you. Certainly I live in Centertown, and you can see that there are cannabis stores kind of coming up everywhere. It was a bit of a funny process. Originally, they were opened at a very slow rate, and we only had 1 or 2 in the whole city, and then it seemed like overnight the floodgates were opened up, which I'm not sure is a very sustainable process, even for all those businesses who are starting up and putting a ton of money into opening all these businesses without really being sure of what the market can handle. I know we do have some rules in our platform around tightening up the rules around cannabis stores a little bit more, making sure that they are acknowledging the appropriate distances from schools, for example, and things like that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Katie. And Scott
Yeah,
Healey.
thanks, Amanda. The explosion of the cannabis industry certainly is cannot not be noticed here in Ottawa. We all live downtown; they're everywhere. At this stage, the market will determine whether they survive and don't survive over the years and months ahead. Certainly agree with Katie that we want to ensure that people and young people are protected, that the bylaws are used by the city to ensure that those stores are in the appropriate place. But at this stage, no changes. The market will determine whether those small businesses survive or not.
Okay, we have Ken Hoffman is standing by, and Ken, I understand you have a question from Twitter. Why don't we hear what that is?
Hi, Amanda. Thanks. We have a question from Joanna Kipp, and she says, we're past the time when we can use incremental actions to address the climate crisis. How will your party act on the climate crisis in line with science? And do you see opportunities to push our federal government to act and set science-aligned targets and actually meet them?
Okay, and I think that we have time for each candidate to answer this question, if you keep your answers to 60 seconds. So why don't we start Shelby Bertrand first for this question with the Green Party. Go ahead, Shelby.
Thank you so much for that. It's a juicy question for the Green candidate. I want to start by saying that the Green Party aims to bring Ontario to net zero by 2045, because 2050 is some nice round pretty number that I think is being popularized, but the IPCC report actually posited a range as the point by which we should be at net zero, and the range starts in the mid 2040s. And we want the greenhouse gas emissions in half by around 2030, because that's also in line with the IPCC report, which labels the 20s as the make or break decade. I'm particularly proud of the fee and dividend carbon budget program from the Green Party, which alleviates a lot of people's concerns about the transparency and fairness of, say, cap and trade as a contrasting strategy. We would raise the fee by $25 per ton every year until 2032, right in line with IPCC recommendations, and give that money right back into the pockets of people and institutions to reward them for cutting on carbon. You're muted, Amanda.
Sorry about that. So thank you very much, Shelby. We're going to go to Scott, Katie, and then Joel. So Scott Healey is next.
Thanks, Katie. Well, I think 60 seconds on the environment is obviously, I think as Shelby said, very short duration. But two examples for the Progressive Conservatives platform. One is the $500 million investment in steel at Tabasco and Sault Ste. Marie to take coal and coke ovens offline, make it electric, and that would reduce upwards of 3 million tons of emissions, upwards of 1 million cars off the road. Secondly, as everyone has been reading and seen over the last 6 months, the commitment by the Progressive Conservatives to electrification of automobiles and the battery industry, I think is second to none in North America, making us, we want to be the world leader in that industry. So thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Scott. And next, I think I said is Katie, is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Katie Gibbs, go ahead.
Well, climate action is why I'm running. I have a background in environmental science and 2 young kids whose future I am worried for. We cannot afford 4 more years of Doug Ford's environmental destruction. The Ontario Liberals have a very strong plan to cut our emissions in half by 2030 and be fully net zero by 2050. Our plan is costed and our CO2 reductions are modeled, actually showing how we're going to achieve that 2030 goal. We're going to do this by transitioning Ontario to a fully clean electricity supply. We're going to protect 30% of the lands in Ontario, plant 800 million trees. We're going to change how we get around by offering generous rebates for electric vehicles and electric bikes. and make transit just $1 to get people out of their cars. And we're going to strengthen the building code to make our buildings more efficient and offer loans and grants to help people retrofit their homes. Thank you.
Thank you, Katie. And Joel Harden.
Thanks, Amanda. I want to focus in on one aspect of a plan we've put forward in consultation with environmental experts across Ontario. It's called the Green New Democratic Deal, because Ottawa has a big role to play. What we have to do is stand up to the natural gas industry, quite frankly. We are looking across the river here. I'm trying to port in the north direction from my dining room table at a province in Quebec that desperately wants transmission lines running over to Ontario so we can accept their emissions-free, waste-free hydroelectricity. What that would do, Amanda, is huge. It would actually provide the semblance of a battery for us to grow our renewable energy sector. But what's standing in the way is the natural gas lobby that wants us to reutilize and increasingly utilize gas-fired natural gas plants around Toronto. We want to close those down by 2030. We have a plan to do it, and it involves accepting Quebec's power that they currently sell to the Americans at a loss. We need the help of Quebec. We can do this. It's a local solution, and that's what the NDP is proposing.
Scott Healey, do you want to use 60 seconds for the rebuttal?
Yeah, sure, Amanda. I mean, with the work of previous governments and during the 4 years of the Progressive Conservative government, Ontario is the only province that is currently on track to meet its emissions targets by 2030. And that's a collaboration of previous governments, as I said, and our own. And so I think Joel makes the comment about Quebec Hydro. I would premise that if it was that easy to run those lines over and we would get all that electricity, we would have done it. And they have billion-dollar contracts with New York State and New England that I suspect are going to be very, very difficult to break in order to provide us. So if it was that easy, I'm sure we would have done it.
Okay. Katie, I think we can give you 30 seconds. How about that? Can the timer do that?
Yeah, 30 seconds.
Okay.
Well, I do want to point out that the current emission reductions are thanks to the previous Liberal government closing coal-fired power plants. Right now, under the current PC's plan, they're going to increase the focus on gas-fired power plants, which is going to increase emissions from our electricity sector by up to 600%. We cannot let that happen while we are in a climate crisis.
Okay. Joel, 30 seconds.
Thanks, Amanda. I want to completely agree with what my Liberal colleague just said. We cannot allow emissions to increase or the capacity of those gas-fired electrical plants by 600%. And honestly, Scott, what's standing in the way are the natural gas companies. They've lobbied me. They've told me, look, Joel, you're going to cancel lots of great natural gas jobs. And I've told them plaintively, there is plenty of jobs in the renewable sector, in the electrical transmission lines we have to run between Ontario and Quebec. I need those energy workers. We need them, but we need them in a sustainable way. We have to stand up to the natural gas lobby.
Would you like, Scott, 30 seconds?
I don't think necessarily the natural gas lobby is the one that's causing the issue with regards to ensuring that Ontario is appropriately has the appropriate energy to continue its industries and to fuel its economy. I think we all agree we need to move boldly but smartly to a greener economy. But that takes a collaboration between industry, business, and the environment, not the three fighting against each other, but collaborating together. And that's what the PC government has been working towards for the last 4 years and will continue in the future.
Okay, we have burned through the first hour with a little bit of extra time. And so we're going to take another, and I'm glad we took a little bit of time for climate because we don't have another question like it in the rest of our time. So I'm glad that we took some time on that. Ken Hoffman is with us. We have another question from social media. Go ahead, Kev.
So a slightly related question, but we have from Karen Wright. The current government plans to expand the 417 and invest in other highways. Is this appropriate in the midst of a climate emergency? Would the investment not be better used for affordable housing, improved childcare, and schools?
Okay, we will give each 60 seconds and we will start with Scott Healey. Go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Karen. And It's a question that obviously has come up quite frequently. The population of Ontario is going to increase by 5 million people between 2020 and 2025 in the next 20 to 25 years. Ottawa is going to increase by 500,000. We have to be able to move people, whether you're in an electric car or a carbon car. People are still going to have to travel, go to soccer games, go to baseball games, bring their families out camping. And we still need to move our product south of the border, which is our largest single trading partner, representing roughly 78% of our trade. It's a competitive world. We need the infrastructure to move the product and people around. By not having congestion, you're going to be reducing carbon emissions. By moving towards electrification of the vehicle industry, which Ontario is fully committed to, that will also reduce emissions. So again, if there's a better solution by saying we're going to have 5 million people in Ontario, how are you going to move them? We have to be able to move people smartly and effectively. And waiting on infrastructure is only going to be dangerous for the province in the long run. We've seen it under the Liberals. We need to move forward.
So 60 seconds for that question. It's going to be Katie Gibbs and then Joel Harden and then Shelby Bertrand. We start with Katie Gibbs now with the Liberal Party. Go ahead.
Well, look, I've knocked on thousands of doors in Ottawa Centre, and I don't think I've had a single door where they have said that our top priority should be building new highways or widening highways. So an Ontario Liberal government would cancel the 413 project. We would not widen the 417. Instead, we think because we are in a climate crisis and an affordability crisis, instead, we're going to invest that money in other things that help people get around while also getting our climate goals. A big part of that is our $1 transit ride across the province, including here in Ottawa. This is actually going to help those who need it most, who don't even have cars, to get around in a way that is cheaper. It's also going to encourage people to actually get out of their cars, use public transit. We also have big investments in municipalities to help them build new cycling infrastructure and rebates for e-bikes to help people choose other ways to get around besides just driving. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Katie, is our timer not working? Is our timer not working? No, then do we have the timer? The timer's working. Okay, super. Let's go now to Joel Harden. Joel.
Well, I want to thank Karen from the Civic Hospital Association for all the work you do, first of all, for the excellent question. We saw this in the last election. Our friends then in the Liberals were campaigning for the widening of Highway 417 that was brought forward by then MPP Bob Shirelli. And we opposed it as New Democrats then, because what a wider highway will mean in Ottawa or anywhere else is more congestion, more cars, more gridlock, which is why we have to get the LRT right, which is one of the reasons why I spent 2 years after holding community meeting after community meeting, advocating for the Conservative government to hold a public inquiry to the LRT so we could find out why this train isn't working, what we signed on to that has not been disclosed to city councillors or to the public. We won that. I was able to work with the Conservative government to get them to declare that public inquiry to the LRT so we'd be able to see that contract and not expand our highways. We need to know how this LRT can work phases 1 through 3, and that's something the NDP is committed to fight for, and I've been honored to do that with the help of residents here.
Shelby Bertrand.
Thanks so much for this. This question gives me the chance to talk about those smart solutions that I've echoed a few times from the Green Party. The Green Party is a believer that urban sprawl is not necessarily growth. The building of highways is expensive for residents and it's expensive for municipalities. When we grow outward, instead of developing smarter in a mixed purpose community kind of way, it costs more per household to have roads going out to the suburbs, to have utilities and public transit to support those kinds of purely residential communities. And it costs more to even support leisure buildings like a library or something in those communities. People with long drives are going to have poorer mental and physical health on those commutes. It's been shown to increase sleep deprivation. It's been shown to increase obesity, and it's expensive for residents as well as municipalities. So highways would not be top priority by a long shot for the Green Party, and we would be thinking strategically.
Okay, thank you very much for that. We're now going to take a short break, 5 minutes. Let me just see what's going to happen during this break. If I understand it, this is going to be a 5-minute break, chance for Judith Shane to come up and talk a little bit about the community associations, and our candidates will get a well-deserved break. Go ahead, Judith.
Hi, everybody. Good evening. For those of you not scooting off to get a cup of coffee or go to the bathroom, we're going to do a couple interactive polls, give you something to do. And then we're going to talk a little bit about our community associations. First poll is coming up now. Okay. And it's debate publicity. How did you find out about this debate? Was it from your community association website, social media, your counselor's website, probably Jeff Leapers, our fantastic official flyer / poster for the debate, word of mouth, or other? Well, please fill in the poll. And we're waiting for the results for the poll. Okay, interesting. So 30% from the community association website, 14% from our flyer, 11% word of mouth, other 19%, social media 19%. Thank you for letting us know. That's actually very helpful to have that information. And now we're going to move on to our second poll, which is about you and your local community associations. And that poll is asking you about if you identify with a particular community association from the Kitchissippi area. Oh, if yes, you do identify with a community association in Kitchissippi, please put down yes. Otherwise, good question. What is a community association? And we're going to talk about that in a couple minutes. You do belong to a community association in Ottawa Centre, but not in the Kitchissippi ward. Or you do belong to a community association, but it's outside of Ottawa Centre. Would you like to answer that? And while you're doing that, just going to mention that in our next question, you'll see the listing of all the community associations that have worked together to bring this debate to you tonight. There's 10 local community associations that have worked together. And they are the McKellar Park Community Association, the Hamptoniana Association, Carlington, Champlain Park, Civic Hospital Neighborhood, Hintonburg, Island Park, Wellington Village, Westboro, and Westboro Beach. So let's take a look. And yes, great. Obviously, we have a lot of people from the Community Association membership watching this debate tonight because 82% of you identify with a community association in Kitchissippi. And thankfully, only 5% of you aren't really sure what a community association is. And we have folks from outside of the local area, but in Ottawa Centre, 12% of you. So thank you very much, all of you, for tuning in tonight. And in terms of which community association you identify with, we have a lot of people, 26% from McKellar Park, Carlington, Champlain at about 8-9%, Civic Hospital at 13%, Hittenburg 16%, Island Park 4%, Wellington Village 9%, and Westboro at 5%, and Westboro Beach 1%, probably because everybody is walking around enjoying the lovely weather up tonight down in the Westboro Beach area. So thank you very much, folks. And thank you very much, community associations who helped put the debate together. You can see the names up there on the screen. And just to remind you that since we are at the roughly halfway point of the debate, that you can still send in live questions to either our Twitter hashtag @CentreQ, or you can send in to our Gmail email address at q@gmail.com. So there is time to get your questions in. Ken Hoffman is monitoring those questions and he will take a look. And lastly, since we asked you if you do get involved in your community association, we know we have a large audience out there tonight, and we want to say thank you to everyone for being here. But for those of you who are not involved in a community association, we want to give you a few reasons why you might enjoy being part of one. First of all, they're situated in the area where you live, and it's a great way to meet your neighbors and to find out what's happening in your area. You can work with your municipal councillor and other elected officials on issues that really matter to you and that affect your daily life, such as development and intensification, transit and transportation, the environment, public safety, and others. And you can also take the time to use the skills you've developed to help organize short-term projects and events such as all candidates debates like we have tonight. You could also find something that sparks your interest, like gardening, beautifying your local park, protecting the local trees and plants. You could even build a skating rink. And there's lots of sports activity that the community associations do as well. And if you're looking for something social, well, community associations have that too. You could join in some social events. Lots of community associations have winter carnivals or summer barbecue or arts in the park. And lastly, it's a good way to just stay informed about what's happening in your neighborhood and your local area, because community associations keep residents informed about historical, current, and local matters. And we use our websites, our newsletters, and our social media to do so. So join in your local community association as a board member, or maybe even just to help out with a single project or an activity. We need you, and you will help to enrich your community, and you will make a difference. And last plug before we go back to our debate, and Amanda, is we've had this big community association event tonight with 10 local associations. We've got another big one coming up on Saturday, June the 4th. That's our Kitchissippi-wide community yard sale, beginning Saturday morning at 8 a.m., rain date June the 5th. So it's a fantastic way to walk through the ward and pick up some terrific bargains. Okay, Amanda, have we taken up too much of your time, or are you ready to go?
No, you're great. Thank you so much, Judith. So welcome back also, and thank you for joining us for this community debate for Ottawa Centre. This has been a debate among the major parties in this riding. In about 40 minutes, we're going to hear summations from the three minor parties who are participating in tonight's show. So I'm your moderator. My name is Amanda Pfeffer, and we'll go to our next theme tonight, which is healthcare. Sue Case brings us our first question. All candidates have a chance to answer this question. Each candidate has 60 seconds to respond to this question. And we are going to start with Joel Harden, and then Katie Gibbs, Scott Healey, and Shelby Bertrand. So we will start again with Joel Harden, and this is the question. What is your action plan to address the overstressed and under-resourced healthcare system in Ontario?
Well, thanks for the question, Amanda. To be blunt, we are not like Mr. Ford's government is proposing to do if he becomes government, put $10 billion into a highway north of Toronto that farmers don't want, that residents don't want, that will lock more people into soul-crushing commutes. We are going to take that $10 billion and put it right into healthcare, right into the hospitals, the community health organizations. We're going to expand access to nurse practitioners and family physicians and family health organizations at Ottawa Centre. A lot of our time in the office in the last 4 years has been trying to help people and families get access to family medicine. That is going to end with an NDP government. And we know we can do it. We know we can do it because we are so low right now. Ontario has the worst per person healthcare funding in the country. That is a staggering statistic. We need to repeal Bill 124, put billions of dollars into the system, no longer treat our elders in hallways, and do a lot better by the staff that make it all happen. That's our plan.
Thank you very much, Joel Harden. The NDP candidate, Katie Gibbs, is next with the Liberal Party.
Yes, thank you. So the Ontario Liberals are focused on rebuilding our healthcare system and making it more resilient going into the future. As we saw during the pandemic, we cannot have a strong healthcare system without healthcare workers. They have been the absolute heroes of the pandemic, yet Ford's Conservatives capped their wages and cut their sick days. We would immediately scrap the wage capping Bill 124 and give all healthcare workers a raise. We would give a raise to PSWs to $25 an hour and guarantee mental health resources for all healthcare workers. We need to also bring more workers into the system. So our goal is to hire 100,000 new doctors and nurses by making it easier for foreign trained workers to come into Canada and get their equivalency. We're planning to invest $1 billion to clear the surgical backlog and make sure that everyone has access to a primary care physician as well. Thank you.
And Scott Healey is next with the PCs. Go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Amanda. The Progressive Conservatives have a plan to invest up to $27 billion over the next 10 years into the infrastructure and hospital system. To say that funding under the Progressive Conservatives has not been at record levels would be really disingenuous during the pandemic. Billions of dollars were put into the system to ensure that patients and the hospital system was looked after, that employees were looked after, and that we were able to recruit as many new nurses, doctors, and support staff as possible. Now, this is not an easy challenge. This is a difficult challenge. We have to get on it, but this is years in the making, and the Progressive Conservatives have recognized that and are moving out with very significant investments, including right here in our own backyard with the largest investment in Ontario in 50 years in the hospital.
Thank you very much. Shelby Bertrand is last with the Green Party. Go ahead, Shelby.
Thank you for that. I'm very proud of the Green Party's approach to health. It's one of those smart solutions and strategic approaches I keep talking about. We have a terrifically expensive overdependence on acute and urgent care right now. It costs $840 a day to keep somebody in a hospital bed, and yet so many people are without a family doctor or primary health care provider. I believe it's 14% of Ontarians. Nurses don't have enough independence to be able to open up their own clinics, which would greatly alleviate things if they want. We're not giving enough to community care clinics, and all these things would keep people out of the ER so that you don't have some people in there with broken bones and other people who need a prescription. We would recruit, attract, and retain GPs and nurses. We would give PSWs a living wage for the indispensable and intimate work that they do, and we would absolutely scrap the caps because that's a fallacious approach to fiscal responsibility in this situation.
Okay, and okay, that's it for that question. We are just going to move on to our next question, also under healthcare.
Amanda, sorry to interrupt, but because there was a claim of disingenuousness, is there a chance to have a brief rebuttal?
Sure. Joel, you get 60 seconds for a rebuttal.
Thank you very much. I just want to point out to readers, folks watching this, that the Toronto Star ran a story January 7th, 2022 entitled "Ford's Cuts Would Have Compromised Healthcare System Even More." And what that story shows is that the Premier was planning major cuts to healthcare, including, if you can believe it, our public health offices, reducing those public health units from 35 to 10 and cutting hospital spending by $200 million a year. What forced the government into actually investing into our healthcare systems was COVID-19. And in fact, the Ontario Hospital Association is noting that in the going forward year from 2022 to 2023, as per the government's proposals, what we're seeing is a tiny, tiny bump up in hospital funding in a context of 7% inflation. I would not call pointing out these criticisms, Scott, disingenuous. I think they're serious. We can't do healthcare on the cheap. We are the lowest funded healthcare jurisdiction in Canada, and we've got to put the money back in so our staff have the support they need.
Scott Healey, you have a minute. Go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Amanda. Healthcare under all provinces roughly represents 50% of our budgets. That is a reality, and it's been that reality for a long time. Obviously, we need support, provinces from the federal government, and the Ontario government works closely to get that funding from the feds in order to support the system. But the money that is continually being invested is in infrastructure, and infrastructure is hospitals. It is the people that man those hospitals and support the patients. In order to be competitive, we have to have a competitive medical system to attract the people to this province in order for them to work, build their businesses, and live. It's not just highways. It's not just the public transit. It is investing in the people. And companies that come to Ontario want to know that they have a solid medical system and healthcare system, the same as they do with education. So the Progressive Conservatives are fully committed to that, understanding the difference between just wasting money and investing in infrastructure and people.
All right, we're going to have more healthcare questions. So let's move on to the next one. Now, this question comes from Stephanie Johnson, and this, again, under healthcare, is directed at NDP candidate Joel Harden and Liberal candidate Katie Gibbs. And here's the question. Sue Johnson asks, more and more young people are struggling with mental health concerns and frequently are not able to access resources. How will your respective healthcare plans address the gaps in mental health coverage? You have 90 seconds to respond to these questions. And why don't we start with Joel Harden?
Thanks, Amanda. And thank you, Stephanie, for the question. It is shocking to realize that there are 28,000 young people on a waiting list for mental health services in the province of Ontario. This hits us, for me personally, and our family at home. My partner works in mental health at the Children's Hospital with an expertise in eating disorders. And we know the pandemic has been so hard on the mental health of kids, given the amount of lost school days. Ontario has the highest proportion of lost school days in the Western world, not just in Canada. That has been so hard on our kids who've lost track of their friends, who've lost track of their self-esteem, and who are hurting themselves. So what the Ontario NDP is proposing is a tripling of spending on mental health. We are led by the experts that are telling us that it should be your OHIP card, not your credit card, that helps you access a minimum of 6 cognitive behavioral therapy sessions per year. That's our goal. It's ambitious, but it means we spend less money on highways that people don't need and more money on people and the staff to make the system work. Mental health is physical health, but too often it's the basement of every hospital. Too often people don't have access to psychotherapy until they're in abject crisis and they're admitted to emergency room. We have to reach people, particularly kids, much earlier. Their mental health is literally the future of our country. So that's why we're going to fund it. We are absolutely going to throw a lot of money at it and manage it well, get resources to kids and professionals so people can get help.
Katie Gibbs.
Yeah, thank you, Stephanie, for the question. There's no doubt that so many in our province are facing mental health crises right now. So our plan is to invest $3 billion in mental health services, and part of this is going to be hiring 3,000 new mental health professionals. As my colleague Joel mentioned, this is particularly an issue for young people who have had 3 disrupted school years. I have 2 young kids. I know just how challenging of a time this has been, particularly for kids. Part of our plan is to hire 1,000 new mental health workers specifically to work in schools to help address the mental health of students in schools and make sure that they get that help that they need. We're going to require every benefit package to include mental health, and we're going to create a new portable benefit package that will include access to mental health coverage for everybody who doesn't currently have benefits. We also, part of mental health is also acknowledging that there is an opioid epidemic right now. People are dying because of it, and so we're also going to spend $300 million on addiction services and have a whole harm reduction approach as well to help those who need mental health and addiction services.
Okay, thank you very much for that. I think this is also, yes, this is also under the theme of healthcare. This question comes from Deborah Ironside, and it's going to be directed at Scott Healey with the PC candidate and Liberal candidate Katie Gibbs. The question: asking the candidate's position on the new Ottawa Hospital location and its construction. Why don't we start with Scott Healey?
Well, thanks, Amanda. The new hospital is desperately needed, as I think every resident here in Ottawa and Eastern Ontario would know. The Civic Hospital is over 100 years old, needs to be replaced. To rehash what happened over the last decade with regards to the movement of that hospital to its current location is water under the bridge. But suffice it to say that the hospital is there. The hospital is going to be fully funded by a progressive conservative government. Anything that needs to work with the community as your local MPP, again, the cliche is the door is open, and I will work and collaborate with you to ensure that whatever aspects of that hospital can be improved so that the residents are well looked after is a top priority. But any delay in that hospital at this stage is only going to push it to the right. And we need a new hospital now for the citizens of Ottawa and Eastern Ontario, not an additional 5, 6, 7, 8 years down the line. This is the biggest capital investment the Ontario government is making in years, and I'm fully supportive of it, and we'll work with the residents of Ottawa to ensure that it is a success for the people of this city.
Katie Gibbs.
Yes, well, like I said, I've knocked on thousands of doors in the riding, and I have certainly heard residents' concerns over the location. And as I said earlier, climate is why I'm running, and I never want to see mature trees cut down. However, we do desperately need a modern hospital in the city, and there's never going to be a perfect site for a project of this scale. So I think at this point, we need to move ahead with the project at the site because we desperately need a new modern hospital for the residents of Ottawa to get the healthcare that they need. And moving it at this point is going to cause a delay that is just not acceptable for the residents of Ottawa. And I will say that knocking on doors, this is something that I have heard as well, is many people saying that they need this hospital, many people who work at the current hospital, sharing stories with me of just the dire condition that the current hospital is in, elevators not working, I think a bat infestation. I've also heard these concerns, people saying, we get the concerns over the location, but we need this hospital. And so I think we have to move forward with it in the current location.
This next question, also healthcare related, is about long-term care, and it comes from the Champlain Park Community Association. As a result, this question is directed at all the candidates. You have 60 seconds each to answer. And here is the question. The pandemic dramatically revealed the failures of our long-term care and home care systems. All parties acknowledge this, and all parties have proposals to fix it. Please explain why your party's proposal measures are better than the others. Again, you have 60 seconds each to take on this question. And we are going to start with Shelby, Bertrand, then Joel Harden, then Katie Gibbs, and Scott Healey. Why don't we start with Shelby? Go ahead.
Thank you for that. I always get emotional during the long-term care questions. Please bear with me. I'm from an aging family whose mom is the primary caregiver of our older people in the family. So I hope I make it through and maintain my professionalism. But our state of long-term care right now has a status of normalized neglect. Bare necessities are taken care of, but that's about it. And it's because of burnt out, disrespected staff and a history of this being neglected and cut in previous leadership. The GPO would deprivatize and implement national standards so that when families have to consider this option, they know they will get quality care. We would pay PSWs a living wage, incentivize people to go into maybe the line of PSW work with a better work environment and the opportunity for micro-credentialing and professional development, invest in more LTC beds and home-themed care for the growing senior population of our future. Thank you.
Thank you, Shelby. Joel Harden.
Thank you for this question. I think the single greatest indictment of our country, apart from what happened to our schools and the effect on our children, has been the unbelievable atrocities detailed in the military's report, where elders in long-term care homes were dying of dehydration, not necessarily the COVID pandemic, an abject crisis. And it is really disheartening to know that so many of the same companies, Extendicare, Revera, Sienna Senior Living, Chartwell have had their contracts renewed going forward by a Conservative government, where people died in their facilities. I think that should sober all of us. We, as the NDP, are proposing to take profits out of this critical sector, home care and long-term care, over an 8-year basis, put the money that's going into highways under Mr. Ford's plan into the homes that our elders will live in. They built this province, they built this country. They deserve a lot better than what Doug Ford gave them in the pandemic, and an NDP government will give that to them.
Okay, Katie Gibbs with the Liberal Party, go ahead.
Well, I agree with my Green and NDP colleagues. After the absolute atrocities that we saw in the long-term care system during the COVID-19 pandemic, there is no question in my mind that we are at a point where we need to completely overhaul the way that we take care of seniors in our community. The Ontario Liberals are committed to completely phasing out for-profit long-term care by 2028 and completely shifting the focus to helping seniors age at home in their community, which is what they want to do. We are going to guarantee that any senior who wants to age at home will be able to receive the care that they need. We'll do this with a $2 billion investment in the system and giving PSWs a raise to $25 an hour to bring more people into the sector. Thank you.
Thank you. And Scott Healey.
Well, the population between 2013 and 2018 of those over 70 increased by 20%. The Liberal Party invested very little into long-term care. The Progressive Conservative government in 2022 brought in the Fixing Long-Term Care Act. That increases the number of directed hours per patient from 2.7 to 4 hours by 2025. The government has invested $6.4 billion in new homes and beds, 31,700 new and over 28,000 upgraded beds in the pipeline. Since 2018, 7,100 beds have been opened or under construction with a net of 2,800. $1 billion has been dedicated over 3 years to stay at home. The Ontario Senior Tax Care at Home Tax Credit of $110 million will impact over 200,000 people. The Ontario Seniors Home Safety Tax Credit of 25% up to $10,000 and a $2,500 per year up to $65 million.
Okay, we have time for an extra question on long-term care, and so I will ask you this. This is Katie, you'll have a chance in a second. This is about the privatization of long-term care. We had gotten some emails about that subject. What would your party do about the privatization of long-term care? And this question is directed at Scott Healey, Joel Harden, and Katie Gibbs, and you each have 90 seconds. And why don't we start with Katie Gibbs?
Well, I'll start by just saying that actually, Scott, we did increase the long-term care beds under the previous Ontario Liberal government, 10,000 new ones, and refurbished 13,000 other ones. But I also feel like I have to point out that not only did these atrocities happen under the Ford Conservative government, but that they actually rewarded the people who were profiting off of seniors in living in absolutely horrific conditions. There was just a story out the other day that executive bonuses actually increased during the pandemic. And then Ford actually rewarded Mike Harris with the Order of Ontario after he oversaw seniors living and dying in disgusting conditions. And I think that's unacceptable. I've already answered most of the previous question. We do not believe that you can have a profit motive when your job is taking care of those who are absolutely most vulnerable in our community. So we're going to completely phase out for-profit long-term care and shift those buildings over to being run by nonprofit or at the municipal level. And any new buildings, we're going to focus more on smaller scale community level care and helping people age at home, which is what they want to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Joel Harden.
Thank you for the question. I just want to point out collegially, I was picking on Scott with a question earlier about the record, as Kitty just pointed out, of the for-profit homes where seniors died, having their contracts renewed. I would be remiss if I didn't mention that senior Liberal Party staff members like Adrian Spafford and John Duffy have also played key roles in recent years in lobbying for the Ontario long-term care industry, which is the voice predominantly of private for-profit companies. I'm very, very pleased that my Liberal friends are now saying we need to get profit out of long-term care, and I hope also home care. But we also have to acknowledge that the grip of these for-profit industries are very, very deep. It now represents 60% of long-term care homes and almost 78% of home care industries. And they pay people lousy wages, and they keep people on part-time contracts, and seniors and staff suffer. So let's come to grips with the fact that we went down the wrong road, starting with Mike Harris in the 1990s, and we have to extricate all of our political parties from this for-profit machine, which is chewing up public resources at the expense of seniors, persons with disabilities, and staff. It's time for us to make sure that people can live safely at home for as long as they need to, and then when they need long-term care, that it's there, but on a not-for-profit and public basis, where every dollar is used for critical care and for people to feel welcome in a home that is joyful.
And Scott Healey.
Yes, thanks, Amanda. This is where I guess, again, the Progressive Conservatives clearly have a different position than my colleagues. We believe that private for-profit and not-for-profit can work together collectively within a system to ensure that all people are adequately looked after. I mean, Joel has lots of anecdotal stories about going around the riding. Well, I've been in 5 or 6 seniors' homes during this campaign, and I did not hear this outcry of issues regarding the treatment of those its residents were getting in those for-profit homes. Did not see it. I spoke with them. I chatted with them. I asked them how they felt. The staff seemed happy. Nothing that I saw would cause me concern at this stage. But when you go to the Liberals, who now want to turn around and take $10 to $12 billion of your tax money to buy out for-profit corporations that is only going to line the pockets of shareholders and stockholders without increasing a single bed in Ontario, I think is very, very irresponsible with your tax money. We can take $10 to $12 billion. They talk about a highway, and we can invest that into long-term care and ensure that we have better care for our citizens.
Okay, I'm just checking the time, and we do have time for
Amanda,
Joel.
can I have a rebuttal because I was named in that last comment?
As
Joel,
was I.
Okay, why don't we give, if you could, I'm sorry to do this to you, but because of time, I'm going to limit it to 30 seconds each. Will that be okay?
Absolutely, I
Both of you?
appreciate it.
Okay, let's go to Joel first.
Well, again, just collegially to Scott, there were 42 people who died at Carlingview Manor in Ottawa, West Nepean. That is a home run by Rivera, which is owned by the federal government's superannuated pension plan. There were 33 precious souls that died at West End Villa. If you look at Sienna, the Madonna Care Facility in Orleans, it was horrific, Scott, horrific. I want you to talk to those families, and offline afterwards, I would be happy to introduce you to Christine Collins, who fought for her brother Peter in Carlingview Manor, and she deserves respect.
Katie Gibbs.
Yes, I will just say as well that I don't see how anybody could see what happened over the past 2 years and think that the right thing to do is continue with the status quo of how we've been taking care of those who are most senior and most vulnerable in our community. If we do not make a big change and overhaul the system now, it's never going to happen. Yes, it will be hard. It's not an easy thing to do, but that's the kind of bold, progressive, right thing to do that an Ontario Liberal government will deliver.
Okay, Scott, do you want 30 seconds?
No, I think I made my case very, very clear on this one.
Okay, we have time for a last Twitter question. Ken Hoffman, go ahead. Who's writing? Who's tweeting at us?
Tweeting.
Okay, we have one from Jenna Griffiths, and she says she lives in Carlington, and she's concerned about the lack of suitable housing in the high crime Caldwell project, where many of the inhabitants are refugees, subjugated women, and children. What are the candidates' action plans to increase access to healthcare, education, and housing, and reduce crime in this marginalized community?
Okay, we're going to give you each 60 seconds. We'll start with Shelby Bertrand. Go ahead.
Thank you for that. So the Green Platform has several plans to ensure that people who are in particularly vulnerable populations don't fall into these patterns of life. A lot of these folks might have mental health issues or disabilities. We would double all social benefits to that end. We are also enthusiastic about universal basic income, which will bring loads of people out of poverty. And a significant portion of the Green Party platform is dedicated to mental health. We would bring mental health care under OHIP. We would make it accessible and more community-based so that hopefully people in these difficult life situations don't find themselves committing crimes, don't find themselves in crises level situations. We would also have mobile intervention teams dedicated to mental health so that it's experts who arrive on the scene and are equipped to deal with some crisis level situations instead of maybe a kind but intimidating looking policeman.
Okay, it's going to be Scott Healey and then Katie Gibbs and then Joel Harden. Scott Healey, you're next.
Thanks, Amanda. I think the position that I, as a local MPP, would be to collaborate with the municipality, local community groups, and law enforcement to ensure that the resources that were necessary for those communities that were either municipally generated or provincially generated would be directed towards them to ensure that those community groups had the funding and the support mechanisms that they needed. Those issues need to be dealt with from the ground up, allow the citizens with the proper support from the province and the municipality to deal with those problems from their own community point of view, not top-down government, big brother knows best, telling them how to do their business.
Thank you, Scott. And I think I said Katie is next, right? Okay,
Yes.
go ahead.
Well, the question really points out the links between housing and mental health and education and poverty. We know these things are all connected. As I mentioned, part of our plan is to invest and actually build many new non-market, deeply affordable units. This will be not-for-profit housing, co-op housing, but also supportive housing for people who do need some additional wraparound services in order to live independently. We're going to invest dramatically into helping more people access mental health services to get the help that they need. And part of this also goes back to the issue of people living in poverty. We are also going to increase social assistance rates for ODSP and Ontario Works. We have a whole economic dignity plan around increasing the minimum wage, but also actually replacing it with a living wage that is tied to the cost of living. And we're also going to bring back the universal basic income demonstration project and hopefully roll that out down the road. Thank you.
Thank you. And Joel Harden.
Well, I just want to begin by acknowledging there are many Ottawas, and that's what this question presents to us. The Caldwell Ottawa community housing buildings are vibrant communities, but they are neglected communities where people do suffer. And this is also about race. It's about income. It's about access to services. And I actually completely agree with what Scott said. The neighbors in those buildings, they know how to look after themselves and their communities, but those kids are not given the same access to resources that other kids elsewhere. The W. Gowling School in Carleton is a fantastic school, but the resources available to it pale in comparison to where my kids go down the street here at Hopewell Avenue School. That has to stop. We have supported the Caldwell Family Centre, a fantastic organization there, as they've tried to raise money. We've been there with Cam McLeod at the Carleton Community Health Centre to support the work they do. The solutions are community-driven, resident-driven. The neighbors at the moment are over-policed and under-resourced. They need help, and an NDP government will help them.
Okay, time now for us to wrap up. We're a little bit started late, so we're a little bit behind. Where the candidates are going to wrap up now. In a few minutes, we're going to hear also from the independent and minority party candidates. They're going to give us 2 minutes each, the three who are part of this show today. That's Josh Rachlis, Glen Armstrong with New Blue, and the Ontario People's Front candidate Raymond Samuels. But first, we're going to hear closing remarks from our major party candidates. And did you also pull a rabbit out of a hat for that as well?
We're going to do reverse order of the
We're going to
opening.
reverse order. Okay. So we are going to start with Joel Harden and then Shelby Bertrand, Scott Healey, and Katie Gibbs. Joel Harden, final remarks.
Well, thank you, Amanda. Thank you, colleagues. Thank you, organizations that put this on tonight. I want to end where I began. It has been a great privilege and honor for me to serve as your member of provincial parliament. I have learned so much from the great community leaders of this riding. And I actually know that in our communities are many of the solutions we need. And what a government needs to do is listen to you, convene meetings, dialogue, and figure out a way to bring those issues to Queen's Park. That's what we've tried to do. 64 public meetings, 4 during the convoy itself, where we were trying to help neighbors find access to resources to keep ourselves safe. We've helped over 7,000 people through our MPP office get access to public services. We've had major legislative wins, Bulis law, services for persons with disabilities, paid placements for personal support workers, and we can do so much more. But we need you to consider voting NDP in Ottawa Centre. We need you to consider an NDP government that can bring a social democratic philosophy to this province to share our resources so we all get ahead.
Okay, and Shelby Bertrand.
Thank you again. Thank you so much for having me tonight. Residents of Ottawa Centre vote green because they want leaders that give the environment the priority it deserves. But residents of Ottawa Centre should also vote green because the highest quality of life lies in the communities of our platform. Communities with accessible and affordable public transit and walkable neighborhoods. Communities with proactive, not reactive healthcare, readily available primary healthcare practitioners, dental care under OHIP, high standard long-term care, and affordable normalized mental health services. Communities that save taxpayers and municipalities their hard-earned money because they're just efficient. On June 2nd, I hope you choose better for yourselves, better for your family, better for your neighbors. On June 2nd, choose better for Ontario. Vote green.
Thank you. And Scott Healey is next with the Progressive Conservatives.
Yeah, thank you, Amanda. Well, I'd like to thank, obviously, my fellow candidates and all the questions that came in from the audience, all very thoughtful. The platforms and the positions have been presented. You now have a very clear choice between a progressive conservative government and the other parties to be your representative. Do you want a government that is going to get things done, that is continuing to get things done, is working on the economy? Ontario's unemployment sits at 5.2%. Toronto remains one of the best areas in the world to do high-tech business. Do you want a government that's going to build hospitals, public transit, schools? Do you want a government that's going to look after workers by increasing their minimum wage, giving them paid sick days? Do you want a government that's going to put money in your pocket? That's the kind of government that I want to represent for you at Queen's Park. So on June 2nd, take a leap of faith with the Progressive Conservatives at Ottawa Centre. Vote Progressive Conservative, Scott Healey. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Scott Healey. And finally, Katie Gibbs with the Liberal Party.
Yes, well, thank you so much to you, Amanda, for moderating, and to all the community associations who put this on. I know it's all volunteer driven, and I really appreciate the hard work that you do. This election, I think that we all have a big choice to make about what kind of future we want, what kind of province we want over the next 4 years. Do you want a future where we have a provincial government that actually listens to science and puts people first, that is going to invest in rebuilding our healthcare system, that is going to completely end for-profit long-term care and help seniors age at home, that is going to invest in strengthening our public education system, that will actually treat the climate crisis like the crisis it is, with bold ideas like $1 transit? If that's the kind of Ontario that you want, then I think the choice for you is the Ontario Liberal Party and me, Katie Gibbs, as your candidate here in Ottawa Centre. We've got a fantastic platform filled with bold solutions, and I can't wait to bring them into reality. Thank you.
Thank you all. Should I ask you if you have any regrets about? No, we won't do that. That was only for prime time debates. Thank you very much, all 4 of you, for taking part in this. We really appreciate it. And again, we've been hearing a debate with the majority candidates. We've been a little bit behind, but I thank you all for your patience. Good luck in your races. We're going to transition now to final remarks from our minority party and independent candidates. And while we do that transition that we have to do in virtual space, Ken Hoffman is with us And he is going to tell us a little bit about what we're doing now, a little bit of an interactive exercise. Tell us about that, Ken.
Thanks, Amanda. Yeah, we just wanted to do a little poll in real time while David is getting our candidates back on. And we would love to know in a few words, what's the major issue that you're thinking about as you are coming into the election? And I'm going to put into chat, I'm going to put a link there. This is a link to a Mentimeter poll. So if you click on that link, you'll have a page open up with you with that question, and you can enter in your response. So I would invite you to do that now. I'm going to put the poll up, and we'll be able to see your answers in real time here. Just one sec. Yes, and they're coming up. Okay, just.
Okay, I did it. Oh, that's nice.
So you can see the words dancing across the screen here.
I see a lot of healthcares.
Really interesting, because we've had a very comprehensive discussion. So interesting to see what's really sticking with people. Looks like healthcare is really coming out.
Yes, there's housing, making a break for it.
Yeah, and climate change coming up on the outset.
Yeah.
Education.
Fantastic.
This is just kind of a fun way to just test the waters a little bit to see how everybody is thinking right now.
We'll post it on the Community Association site, the final picture.
Absolutely. Yeah.
That's fantastic.
So back to you, Amanda.
Okay. Okay, let's see. Let me go back here. So we are now down to the final wire, and we have three people from the minority party and who are running as minority party and independent candidates who have taken the time to run as candidates in this election. And why don't we introduce our first candidate? Did you pick numbers to be first, second, third? If not, I will go in. I'll start with Josh Rachlis. And then it will be Glen Armstrong and Raymond Samuels last. So go ahead, Josh, if you're with us.
All right. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Excellent. Well, I just wanted to say thank you to all the other candidates. Is the timer visible? I feel like.
Can you see it? You're at 147. 146,
all right. Well, I'll just rush.
145.
Sorry. Oh my gosh. Okay. I drew little pictures of each candidate because I was so impressed with them. There's the whole group. There's Amanda, there's Scott, and there's the timer that did a great job. And I was inspired to write a little song about you guys. Thank you for caring about Ottawa Centre so much. When I'm at Queen's Park, I will keep in touch. No, seriously though, I want to thank you for the 2-hour introduction to my performance. I am Josh Rachlis. I ran for the Green Party 4 times and twice for the mayor of Toronto, and I was on Mike Schreiner's shadow cabinet, and I wrote the love song for Elizabeth May that went viral in the 2011 election. So I'm a pretty green guy, but I like to think of myself as a Greens plus guy because I take on the best qualities of all the parties. And as an independent, I'm free to do what's right for Ontarians and Ottawa Centarians, not just what my party wants. As a copywriter in Toronto, I built billion-dollar brands, and I want to use my marketing skills to put Ottawa and Ontario on the map. For tourism, tech, the entertainment industry, Speaking of entertainment, I'm an actor member, and I know there are 4 movies being shot in Ottawa right now, and I was asked by a local talent agency to be an extra in them. So let's make Ottawa even more attractive to the movie industry. I do stand-up comedy around town. I can tell you there's open mics every night of the week. Why do only Montreal and Toronto and Winnipeg have comedy festivals? We should have one too. I'm big on tech. We should have all the workers come here, especially everybody can work remotely. Why won't they live in Ottawa? Maybe because the Wi-Fi is pretty slow. If you go to Cornwall, you can't even post an Instagram story. So we need to fix that. I like the idea of including dental care and mental health care and OHIP, and especially we should be teaching mental care in school, not using it as a preventative thing if people have mental problems. If I had learned cognitive behavioral therapy in school, I would probably be a very different person right now. And personally, on my daily walks, I pick up litter and I invite anybody to come with me on those walks. I also post in Facebook neighborhoods asking people if they want to meet up on patios, because I know that the pandemic's been very lonely and I've been very lonely. So if anybody wants to meet up, please do that. And I invite any residents to contact me if you want to do a Zoom town hall every day this election to talk about the issues that are important.
Thank you, Josh.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Josh. We're all out of time. That's great. And I hope that you post that picture so that we can share it.
I will.
Next, we have new blue candidate, Glen Armstrong. Go ahead, Glen.
My name is Glen Armstrong, and I am your new blue candidate in Ottawa Centre. I am originally from Sarnia, and I am married with an 18-year-old daughter. I have taught both internationally and here in Ontario. In 2018, I was elected to the Ottawa Catholic School Board and have served on many committees. We will roll back the mandate and lockdown measures of the PC government, reform education by introducing alternative schooling tax credits, take down wind turbines to reduce electricity rates and grow the economy, cut the HST and axe Ford's industrial carbon tax, scrap the 100 million taxpayer subsidy for political parties, cancel the Toronto Star's 500 million online gambling license, clear the backlog of procedures in our healthcare. The Ford PCs have been a big disappointment. The cost of living has skyrocketed. Taxes went up. They withheld early treatment of COVID-19 and failed to protect those at risk. Spending is more than the previous government before COVID spending. We have seen the largest deficit spending ever. Electricity rates have gone up and manufacturing jobs have been lost. The sex ed curriculum was the same as the previous government, and they introduced critical race theory under Bill 67. The per vote taxpayer subsidy was increased. They rammed through Bill 100. They are responsible for the job losses and loss of education due to vaccine mandates. The Liberals, PC Party, NDP are all the same. They are part of the problem, and the new blueprint is the solution. Why I'm running: to instill pride in our Ontario heritage, bring people back together, boost the economy, and give hope to those who have lost in the pandemic. Finally, together, we will ensure we continue to challenge the left, balance the narrative, and change the course. You heard from the left in the debate. You've just heard from the right. Thank you.
Thank you for being patient, Glen. And finally, Raymond Samuels is with us with the Ontario People's Front Party. Go ahead, Raymond.
You can hear me?
We can hear you. We can't see you, but we can hear you.
Okay, I don't know what's going on. I'll start video. Okay.
There we go.
Okay.
Let's start the timer again. Hang on, we'll give you the, okay, let's start that again. Can you see the timer, Raymond? I think if you just press that arrow button beside all the pictures. You see that?
No, I'll just try to speak as fast as possible. I don't see the
Okay.
timer. Okay. I'm starting off with my basic preamble. Government-funded bodies like representative community associations, which organize the debate tonight, have a fiduciary obligation to ensure the appearance of impartiality and equity in any way they choose to engage themselves in the electoral process, and that includes the administering of any political debate during an election. That's not what on tonight. My name is Raymond Samuels. I'm the leader of the Ontario People's Front. There are 3 vital questions which have arisen out of the pandemic. Question one is, have we reached a stage in which the role of our government is to simply force citizens to inject into their bodies whatever products that big pharmaceutical and biotech companies dream up under the threat of the law? Have we also reached a stage in which there's no place for independent scientific verification of data, and anyone who doesn't agree with the corporation's assertions that their medical products are the greatest things since sliced bread are to be labeled as conspiracy theorists? Have we also reached a stage where we turn our back against the families who have experienced the trauma of dead or permanently injured loved ones as a result of having taken a pharmaceutical product? I'm running as a candidate in behalf of the voiceless in Ottawa Centre. Our Ontario People's Front supports the defense of our Charter of Rights and Freedoms, a just society for all, including the affirmation of universal public health care, the eradication of homelessness through the Quality of Living Bill of Rights, environmental protection against intentionally orchestrated global warming designed to destabilize the planet, and other innovative policies presented on our website, ontariopeoplesfront.ca. I invite anyone who wants to learn more about our campaign to join us via Skype 7 p.m. on May 24th to discuss and debate issues which I was excluded from debating tonight. You can email our Ontario People's Front email at business@belknot.ca, and we'll send you a Skype link if you wish to participate in that debate. Thank you.
Thank you very much, all of the candidates, for participating tonight. Mr. Raymond, so that we can get on, make sure that YouTube doesn't ban us for misinformation about vaccines. I do have to rebut that the risk of vaccines and concern about the risk of vaccines is widely debunked. You don't have to rely on me. You can find specific information debunking risks over suggested risks about vaccines through some 50 or so medical agencies, including Reuters, US Today, the BBC, McGill University, the Centre for Disease Control, and our own Canadian Health Agency. I want to thank everyone who took part in tonight's debate. We have 7 people in Ottawa Centre who took the time and effort and expense to take part in the political process. So we want to thank you. And we want to thank all of you who took the time tonight to listen to this debate. We hope it has helped you make your own decision this election. Ottawa Centre is set to be a very hot race this election, so your vote could make a difference. I'm Amanda Pfeffer, and on behalf of everyone who put this debate together, I want to thank you for joining us tonight.